Section 4 doesn't really affect you, but Section 5 does. Section 5 comes to the Indian Creek Bridge, which has a rough patch of pavement. So you may know that south of town by the way you spill your coffee. That is the beginning of Section 5 for this area. Section 5 upgrades 21 miles of State Road 37 from the Indian Creek Bridge south to where the Section 4 connection is, which is just south of that road in Bloomington. Yes, it is called that road. It is a P3 public-private partnership, and which essentially means that we have contracted with the developer who is financing it, building it, designing it, building it, and is operating the roadway. And in fact, they are already operating the roadway as of December 1st. You may notice if you've driven that 21 miles, there's less trash because they're out there picking it up. They have some very specific contract standards, and they are living up to those standards for the 6 weeks that they've had operation of the road. They will be operating that road for 35 years. They're operating it while it's under construction for the next 2 years, and then they will have 35 years beyond that. It will be open at the end of 2016, which means it'll be a free-flowing highway, interstate highway at that time. So you will have an interstate connection that runs from just south of Martinsville to the Ohio River with no stopping. The access points for Section 5, if you start at the south, which is just north of Victor Pike or at that road in Bloomington, I guess it looks like we're upside down here. Okay, so we'll start north. Most current frequent to you use will be Liberty Church Road. Liberty Church Road is an interchange. It will serve the area that I believe Martinsville has annexed or is in the process of annexing. And so you'll have a connection there for commercial and industry right there at Liberty Church Road. The next interchange is actually it's an overpass at Chambers Pike. Chambers Pike is where the water tower is for Washington Township Water. You may notice that on the west side of the road when you're going down 37. So that would be an overpass at that location. From there, Sample Road, an identifier for you is where the gas station is on 37 on the east side of the road. That will be an interchange. The next location for an interchange is Walnut Street. Walnut Street right now is kind of the entry to Bloomington. It's often the way college kids know how to get into Bloomington because that's how they get to the IU campus. When it was closed this summer, it was funny. The construction folks got questions. People stopping by the side of the road saying, how do I get to Bloomington? How do I get to IU? This is the only way I know. That flyover that goes into Bloomington will stay there. It will not be created into a full interchange. It will just be a one-direction interchange, so you can get off the interstate or you can get on the interstate going north, but you will not be able to go south from that interchange. So it will stay the same as it is now. Kinser Pike is, some of you may know because you've received a ticket here, is where the speed limit changes from 60 to 55 as the current 37. I remind you of that because there's usually a police officer sitting there to remind you. The development partners have completed their project management planning, meaning that they've told us how they plan to execute the project, what their quality plans are, how they're going to run safety, how they're going to run maintenance of traffic. They have a contract that we signed in April of 2014, and then they financially closed and have a full bank of money ready to spend on building this project. They will be starting, the developer will be starting in the next couple of weeks at that road and Rockport Road. Those are connections that we made there, and an overpass at Rockport Road. So the construction that you see in Section 4 now will kind of start extending north a little bit. You'll see some of those impacts when you're traveling through Bloomington south. The other thing that you'll notice right now, trees are coming down by virtue of Kreider and Homer Tree Services. They are quickly gobbling up trees alongside where there will be interchanges and expansions on bridges and things like that. So throughout the rest of this winter, you will see they're not too close to Martinsville at this point, but they will be moving north. And so you will see wood chips beside the road on the hillsides as they make way for the expanded road. The couple of points to note: there are annual meetings required in the contract with the developer, and so they had their first annual meeting in October. Their next one they're hoping to have in the March-April timeframe. They're to notify the public of annual meetings and have these somewhat construction updates. Here's what you can expect to see out of the developer in the next few weeks, months. So every year they're going to tell you what they're going to do before they do it and involve the public in that. There are 3 noise barriers in Wilmington. There are 3 apartment complexes essentially that will receive protection from any additional noise made by the highway. There's some pretty strict federal guidelines about noise barriers, and in high density areas it's more common to see noise barriers, so there will be some noise barriers built. That's kind of the status of where Section 5 is, and I'll be around.
Great, thanks, Sandra. So as we start this process for Section 6, some of you may have been involved back in 2005 when we initially started the Tier 2 process for Section 6, but there was a policy decision made to really focus on the Tier 2s for Sections 1 through 5, and so that was the point in which Section 6 got put on hold, and that was there was a public information meeting in Martinsville that was pretty well attended. So as we work through this process, we will have additional public information meetings and public hearings, and I would anticipate probably the same level of participation, if not more, so we look forward to that. Really, as far as this project is concerned, our kind of starting line in the sand is this notice of intent that was published by the Federal Highway Administration on October 15th of 2014. So that's really our kind of green light to start this process. So just to give you an idea of what are we talking about when we talk about Section 6. So the Tier 1 environmental study looked at following 37 from Martinsville to Indianapolis. As we're starting this Tier 2 process, we have the ability to look at other alternatives that are not on 37 alignment. Primarily, we're looking at those because of the potential impacts to different communities, have to do with additional development along the corridor. So as we go forward through this process, we'll still be considering the 37 alignment, but we'll be considering other options because when we get to the end of this, we want to make sure that we made the best decision for all of the folks that will be impacted by this project, which as you can see, if you look to the east and the west of 37, there are quite a few communities that will be in proximity to this road alignment, so we want to make sure that everybody is taken into consideration through this process. So one question that has come up a couple times, and hence the slide you have here. So when you think about the environmental process, it's not just about wetlands or endangered species. It includes all of these other variables. We look at the air impacts, the noise impacts. We look at socioeconomic indicators, businesses, jobs, residences that are impacted, schools, EMS, hospitals. So we're looking at all of the variables. If you think of it like kind of like a spider web, right? All the pieces are connected, and if something pulls at one part of that web, it's going to have a ripple effect and touch all of the other pieces. And so as we're going through this process, it's just important to remember that that the name of this process is sometimes a misnomer, that we're not just looking at the environment, we're looking at all of these different factors as we go forward. So our project team for Section 6, so you have myself, and then I have a co-project manager. His name is Kevin Hetrick. He's an engineer by trade, so he's our technical expert within INDOT. And then we have our consultants for Section 6, who some of you may have met them on previous activities related to I-69, but that team consists of HNTV and then the Lockmuller Group. And then we also have the Federal Highway Administration because, as we go through this process, they will be in step with us all along the way. Because we need, ultimately at the end of this, we need their approval. They're the ones that are going to sign off on our draft EIS. They're going to sign off on the final EIS, and then the last action is the record of decision. And they're the ones that once they sign it, it's kind of their their stamp of approval. And so to ensure that when we get to that record of decision point, that they are comfortable with what the recommendations are, they are involved through the entire process to ask questions, help us cross-check issues if they feel we need to vet something a little bit more. So they are certainly part of our team as we go through this. Another thing that's important to note is that INDOT is committed to having a very robust public involvement program, not only because federal statute and federal highway require that we have a public involvement program, but also because, as I mentioned before, there's so many different communities and stakeholders that are impacted by this process that we want to ensure that we have a touch point with everyone and that everyone has the opportunity to have their voices and opinions and concerns heard throughout this process. And the list here on the screen are a couple of ways that we plan to do this. So we plan to have 2 community advisory committees. One will be, we divide them into a north and a south, just because the purpose of those meetings is to be kind of a more refined group of people, and we felt that if we put too many people in one room, that not everybody would have the opportunity to bring up issues or ask questions. So initially we've broken those out, and then we have a stakeholder working group meeting, which is really a technical meeting. So that one consists of city planners or town planners or county planners for that matter, and engineers that will be able to bring up what specific issues might be impacting those communities and areas that would be impacted by this project. Land use panels, we're still a little bit early for those. We'd anticipate those being probably about a year out before we get to that juncture. And same probably with the Section 106 consulting parties. The Speakers Bureau it's not an official, Speakers Bureau like you would contact an organization to get a, legislator or somebody else. It's not that. It's if you contact our project team, it's a way for us to keep organized on which groups we're meeting with, ensuring that the presentations that we come and give are relevant to the questions that you have or the interests that you have. So that's something that we manage within our project team. And then a couple of other ways to find out about what's going on in the project. We have our project website, which is the same web address that you may or may not be familiar with from, it's probably over 10 years old at this point. It's the I-69 Indy EVN.org. It's the corridor website, but it's transitioned over to INDOT, so when you go there now, it's broken out by section. So there's a Section 6 page specifically. You'll be able to go and get information about what's going on with Section 6. And then also we'll be opening a project office, hopefully this first quarter of 2015. And so the purpose of our project office will be to allow people to have a physical place to come in and ask questions about the project. And then when we get to the point of having maps available, looking at the different alignments and what areas they may impact, then that'll be a good place to come in and ask questions, and you can be walked through the maps and things like that. So when that information is available, we'll be sure to provide it to Tanya and Jamie so that you all will know where we're located, and you're certainly welcome to stop by at any time during our business hours, or if you need to set an appointment, we would certainly welcome that as well. So I probably jumped into these a little bit earlier, but this is our tentative schedule of actions that we anticipate this year. So we have those community advisory groups, or CACs is the acronym. We in government, I think, tend to like acronyms more than most, I think. So the CACs and the stakeholder working groups will meet quarterly. We're also anticipating to have some field work that will occur once the weather warms up a little bit. We'll have people kind of assessing utilities, other sorts of impacts. So when we get to that point, we'll be providing notice letters to those that will be impacted, so that there's better planning and awareness of what's going on. I would also say that our project team members, any of the folks that would be out in the field, they will have identification that demonstrates that they are part of our project team. So if you ever have a question of who is that strange person on the side of the road, are they related to I-69, or is it just a person that has some other interest, you'll be able to go up to our project team members and ask them why they're there. They'll be able to tell you, and if they're looking at a particular property, they'll be able to provide you documentation on why they're there. So kind of rest of is that it'll be well thought out and easily identifiable. And then as other public information opportunities or things come up, that information will be made available on the website, and we'll issue releases as well. Another important thing to note is that we're anticipating this process to be a 2 to 3 year process, with our record of decision from Federal Highway being signed off on in early 2018. And what that means is that over the next 2 to 3 years, there is a lot of research and analysis that will be done on all of the impacts. And so rest assured that once we get to that draft EIS and even to our final documents, they will be as sound as they possibly could be. And INDOT as an agency, so our priorities at INDOT kind of fall within 3 buckets. And these are also directives that we received from Governor Pence. So we're charged with taking care of what we have, finishing what we started, and planning for the future. And Section 6 of I-69 falls in that middle bucket, to finish what we start. And so INDOT is committed to finishing I-69 through where we need to connect to Indianapolis. And the first near-term component of that is working through this environmental impact process, because without this process, we wouldn't be able to go on to construction. This is a federal requirement that we have to go through to get to the construction component. And with that, I think that's our presentation. So I guess we'll entertain questions. If anyone has questions for myself or Sandra, we can address questions about both. Yes, sir.
When Sandra was up there, she took Morgan County and went south. She didn't mention anything about Morgan County north, as far as where the line where Morgan Monroe is.
So the line for the 2 sections is at Indian Creek, which is just south of Martinsville.
Yeah. And there wasn't anything between Indian Creek and the Monroe County line. There was in here.
Sure, there's an interchange at Liberty Church, which is south of Indian Creek, and then Chambers Pike, which is over into Monroe County. So the interchange that will serve most of the southern part of Morgan County will be the Liberty Church interchange. And there will be a series of connection roads or frontage roads that will connect to Old 37. INDOT is revamping the bridge that the county closed in 2013. That will be part of that connection of roads. So for local road service, you'll be using Old 37 for the interstate.
Okay, and I live in that section, so I'm very familiar with that. Is there going to be, what's going to be at Harrigan Road?
Harrigan Road will be closed, and there'll be connectivity to, you won't just dead end at the interstate, but you'll have connectivity backwards from Harrigan Road out. So there's a series of turkey track on the west side that will serve as frontage area, and then you go east on Harrigan, that's actually the state forest, and so it's served by Old 037.
Will there be an overpass there? Will that end?
Right.
Any access south of Harrigan Road?
You're asking me to scratch my memory here about how that access road works.
Turkey track.
Turkey track.
Right at the county line right now.
Right.
It gets you to the highway there.
There's a couple of connections between what isn't connected on Turkey Track right now and down to the interchange.
We're going to have to go north to go south.
Yes.
So I understand it's no longer certain that I-69 will follow 37 through Martinsville.
That's correct.
So what are the alternatives and what that?
So we're at the very beginning of this process. So we're in the process of developing our conceptual alternatives, which are kind of our first blush at what are those other options. And when we have those a little bit more refined, we will make those available so that folks can ask questions. And that would be probably later spring, early summer of this year. And then a year from now, we will have our preliminary alternatives. So the way that we would get from our conceptual alternatives to our preliminary alternatives is we will set criteria of what types of impacts. There could be things that, the conceptual alternatives right now, that could invalidate them, like something that would be too much in a floodplain and would require, an excessively large bridge that would make it not a cost, reasonably cost alternative. And so we'll have a set of criteria that will help us refine that, so that when we bring it out for, the preliminary alternatives, we're really making a best use of everybody's time by having put all that additional engineering thought, looking at the surveys. There could be alignments that impact archaeological sites or any of those other sorts of variables that I mentioned. That'll help us refine it.
To what extent is it dependent on what the legislature does with the existing prohibitions?
So I would say that there's currently legislation this session, but we also have a couple more legislative sessions before we get to our record of decision. And so we're certainly monitoring what's going on. But I would say that throughout this whole process, it's our intent to still consider 37 as one of our alternatives.
Yeah, in section 5, you were saying that was being privately financed, built, and served for 35 years. Two questions. One, how's that company going to make a profit or recover their investment? And two, would that be the same mechanism that would be looked at for section 6?
So I'll answer two while Sandra's making her way up here. So for section 6, kind of in parallel with this environmental process, we are doing to assess how we would plan to pay for the project itself in section 6.
I think the first thing you need to hear is you'll be able to drive from Evansville to Indianapolis toll-free. Okay? That's the key underlying thing that you need to know. So while part of Sarah's study, part of the study that she has to do is also what's the cost of that road, and then determining how to implement that cost. For section 5, they invent the innovations that they can bring to the table to reduce their construction costs and yet have a maintainable road, because obviously it's expensive to maintain something that you build cheap. So that's their model, is to build it at that prime split between sustainable and cost effective. And then we will be making availability payments for 35 years. So those availability payments will cover the cost of the bonds that they issued, as well as the maintenance. So not just the snow and trash removal kind of maintenance, but also the maintenance of, gosh, the bridge decks need to be repaired every 20 years. The pavement needs to be revamped every 15 years. They will be responsible for all of those costs, and in return for all of those maintenance items, we'll be giving them an availability payment yearly.
I'm making the assumption that section 5, 2nd Street and 3rd Street will remain just like they are, only maybe remodeled a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't really go the rest of the way south because I kind of stopped there at the top of the hill there in Pinter Pike. But 46, the big interchange, stays pretty much as it is. There's going to be some drainage added to that, so you'll see some, I think, detention ponds in the middle. Vernal Pike is the light that we come to after 46, and that will become an overpass. The 3rd Street Bridge will be widened to accommodate some bike and ped facilities, but the configuration stays the same. 2nd Street configuration stays the same. And then there's 2 more interchanges added, one at Tap Road, which is about a mile from 2nd Street, and then Fullerton Pike, which is a little more than a mile beyond Tap Road.
Is it typical in a project such as this for the initial plan to change in the situation? For example, have you had any changes from section 1 to section 5, different from what your original thought was? And I guess then that question is, if originally the plan was to go up to 37, even though it wasn't set in stone, what kind of made the thought process change?
As we came from 1 through 5, we were operating under the Tier 1, which was a decision made in 2004. And so each of those were individually studied in the way that they're studying Section 6. And they studied alternatives basically within the alignment. And that was a 2,000-foot alignment. that they study those alternatives in. So they could do little crooks and crannies in order to get around things. And there were no major changes in 1 through 5. However, we finished the environmental study on 5 in 2013. So it was 9 years after the initial was done. We're on 10 years now.
So for section 6, a couple of variables played into that. Certainly, as alluded to earlier, the legislation. So looking at what our potential impacts are, where 37 currently connects to 465. Looking at the development of the new airport, which has occurred in the last 10 years. And then also additional development impacts along 37 with different businesses and residential areas and being considerate of that development. I think part of this process is not to just lock ourselves into one road and ignore all the other variables. And so part of this we have to look at, is it more expensive to build an alignment through a very developed area, or is it worth considering other options that have different impacts to folks? And so through this whole process, we'll do our best to balance that out. Oh, there is, sure.
When section 5 is fully open, we will have, I imagine, considerable more traffic flowing north-south from across Martinsville and to the north. Is there plans to manage that increased traffic before section 6 is concluded? Will there be additional stoplights? What will we do with that 37 corridor that has the additional traffic flowing either south to the Interstate 69 or north to Indianapolis?
Well, the good news is that the traffic doesn't just turn on in 2016. It builds over the years. And so our study in section 5 accounts for traffic 30 years out. And so when you see traffic numbers or anything referenced, we planned for traffic 30 years out. Same thing that Sarah's happened to do for section 6. So the good news is there's not an immediate hit on traffic coming through Martinsville. The bad news is there will be some increased traffic, some increased truck traffic. And that's something that will have to be part of the discussions and study. We've got a couple of years here, and like I said, it won't just hit in 2016.